Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I said that season 10 was going to be a different season, and so we are doing something fun today. We've got two guests on the podcast. We've got Rich Kuepper he's the co-founder of Leading Human Corporate Learning and Development Company, and we also have his partner, Sarah Harper, who is also another co-founder of Leading Human. She's also a professional executive coach and consultant. And I'm excited to see how we navigate this conversation about being in the driver's seat. So welcome, Rich. Welcome, Sarah, to the show.
Thank you, Simone. Very happy to be part of this.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, let's start with Rich. Rich, tell us a little bit about your career story. Where did you get started?
So it's been a long and windy road, as so many people could probably relate to. I have a background in electrical engineering, and I worked in engineering until I was approached by the vice president of sales to get involved on the sales side. And of course, as an engineer, I didn't like or trust salespeople at the time. But I also knew that for me to expand my skill set and to expand my career opportunities, getting on the revenue generating side of a business was an important a step for me. And so I took the risk, took the plunge into that. It was a completely unexpectedly steep learning curve to be on the sales side of an organization. People think, I have been told I have natural skills in that area, but they certainly didn't feel natural if I had them at the time. It was difficult. Talk about stretching and getting outside your comfort zone. I got involved in sales training, and I found that I really loved developing other human beings. When they were successful, I felt successful in helping someone progress. And from that point, I decided to start my own training company. That was Lead USA. And for 25 years, I led team and leadership development programs in a group setting up until COVID came. And that created another transition. And that's when Sarah and I partnered to create Leading Human. So lots of transitions, lots of uncomfortable moments, but always trying to expand myself and my ability to have an impact on others.
Awesome. Well, I'm coming back to you because I want to hear, we jump right to electrical engineering, and I want to hear what you really wanted to be when you were a kid and how you jumped from there to electrical engineering. But first, let's bring Sarah in so she can tell us a little bit about her career journey, because I'm hearing 20 years, 20 or so years in coaching, et cetera. So Sarah, tell us a little bit about your story and your journey.
Yeah, I actually started off in finance, getting a degree in finance, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I don't know. You just mentioned when you were a kid, right? Like I wish I could go back to when I was a kid and know what that is that I wanted to be. We kind of lose that as we become adults, I feel, and we have to then rediscover it. And so I had a degree in finance because I thought, I don't know what I want to do, but understanding how money works in a capitalist society seems to make sense. So I did that, worked for a couple of years, and then I went back and got an MBA in finance, but also organizational behavior and design. And so I always liked how people interacted and worked together and why and what motivates people. From there, though, I left and went off on kind of like the MBA career path, went off to work in executive training programs. The internet was taking off as this new information superhighway, people were calling it. So I started to work in that. And then over the years, really realized, as like Rich was saying, loved helping unpack the potential of other people. And so I was a manager of teams, and I become an executive in doing that and helping create repeatable, scalable, profitable businesses. But COVID really helped to refocus, to really double down on developing other people and coaching and shifting to learning and development. And then through that journey, I met Rich, which we can share that as well if it's helpful. But that's kind of my background.
I kind of feel like we say, so how did you meet?
Yeah, I don't think either one of our spouses care. They want us to get along and want this to be good and a good working relationship. So that'd be okay. Rich, you want to tell the story about how we met?
Yes. So I have a client and who became a friend, and she is a CEO of an international tech company. And just so happened that Sarah was her coach. And this is a very intuitive female leader. And she said, you should really connect with my coach, because there's a lot of energy balance between the two of you guys. Like she just had that instinct. And, I always found that the most effective leaders have that instinct around people and dynamics, and she made the connection. And so Sarah and I met on a Zoom call and have been talking, I think, every day since. And we decided to form a company called Leading Human, because we do believe that we have to bring humanity back into organizations, and that because of COVID and the challenges and the uncertainty and the destabilization that people were feeling, we needed that human connection more than ever. And people were suffering without it. And so that's kind of the core foundation of how do we develop human beings, but do it in a way that people feel supported in a very fundamental, natural, human way.
My brain went to talk to us about the relevance of humanity on careers.
I think it's, I'll jump in. I think it's more important than ever. I hear from clients that I coach, CEOs and others, and I think Rich has heard this as well, that with the influx of AI and the changes that's happening, innovation, creativity, collaboration is more important than ever before. And that really is the core of humanity, right? People have survived because of working together and working in, it takes a tribe to raise a child, or what do they say? So it's like, or a village, I guess, whatever. But that idea of people coming together and working together to create something greater than themselves is a great feeling when you're kind of in the flow in an organization and doing that. And that humanity, I think, is more important than ever to help get to those skills. And then I also think, as we can all see this influx with regards to, and hopefully for the positive, a shift as it relates to mental health. And figuring out, and it's tough to thread that needle around showing up as your full self, and how much of your full self do you want to be present at work? And do you want your manager, colleagues, friends at work to know about? And how much of that do you want to be allowed to kind of keep to yourself and be private? And so I think we're shifting the dynamics in work right now for that. And so creating that space for people to show up as humans and learn some more of those human connecting skills that everyone just assumes that you've been taught, but no one ever teaches you, right? People just assume, oh, sure, you know how to collaborate, you know how to set roles and goals and whatever, or
boundaries.
That's another big one we do a lot of work on, is boundaries and values. But what we're generally not, and you're just expected to know it, or expected to have learned it through osmosis of your managers, of others. And so it's a long-winded answer to, that's kind of how we see humanity coming in, is both those ways.
Love what you said. Want to explore that a bit more, but first let's talk about the driver's seat. I don't want to forget about the driver's seat. And sounds like you are both in the driver's seat because you decided to partner together on this journey for Leading Human. So is it a safe assumption that you're in the driver's seat? You're both feeling in the driver's seat?
I would say for sure. And I was driving on my own for 25 years. And
are you a good driver?
Depending on the year, I guess. I've hit a few off ramps from time to time by accident, but that is all part of the learning experience. And I do believe you do get better with time if you're open to learn and getting feedback, right? And I have to say that having a partner now here in Sarah, who has a completely different background, a different work experience, has been a tremendous. It makes me a better driver, right? I just speak for myself here. It makes me a better driver because I see how she navigates. I learn from that. And I also have a sounding board to discuss what's the best road to take. Instead of making the decisions on my own, I have at least someone I can, a sounding board, a partner to help navigate. Because it's, the life of an entrepreneur is a challenging life. It can be incredibly rewarding in many ways and enriching, but it's a challenge, right? That's why a lot of people go for the safety of a regular 9 to 5 kind of a thing, because there are a lot of risks, and it's nice to kind of share that with someone who I trust, completely.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Yeah, and I'd say, I thought if you had asked me, 5-10 years ago, I was in the driver's seat, I probably would have thought that I was, but I wasn't. And I don't think it just means being an entrepreneur to be in the driver's seat. And I know from your past podcasts and things, there's people who are in the driver's seat and definitely not just entrepreneurs. But I think that it's aligning to what your passion is and what your purpose is in driving it. Like I would have thought I was in the driver's seat before with my career because I was being successful and doing well, but I was on the wrong road. I had to kind of switch roads. And I've always said that I didn't want to do this alone. And I think Rich is right. We have a very symbiotic relationship. I learned so much from him. We're good balances. We know when we're stressed and kind of step back. People are like, how's it going? How's it working? Like, it's great, because we do respect our differences and appreciate them. And so I do feel like it's, I was thinking of the analogy, like a long road trip. Rich was on a road trip for like 20 years by himself driving. And it's a lot, not to get to stop at the rest stops and stretch your legs and let someone else drive for a while. And so it's really great that we know that, oh, gee, I'm going to go on vacation. This person's got it. Or can you figure this out? I don't know how to do it. Great. So it's really helpful to have kind of like a co-pilot.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you recognize that when we talk about the driver's seat, it's, not just jumping to your own, doing your own thing. But what I mean by it is more being in control of the decisions around your career and not letting others guide you onto a road that you don't want to be on, because that's happened to me. And I know some of our listeners, that happens for them as well. When we talk about the formula or the key or the secret ingredients for owning or succeeding in your career, what would you say? And we'll start with Rich here. What would you say are your key ingredients to having a successful career where you are, in fact, in the driver's seat?
I would say if I look back early when I was a younger man, I had my own insecurities about my ability to make a good decision. I think it was just how I grew up, kind of a thing where and I had to grow into that. I had to make decisions. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good, and be open to the feedback when they weren't good. Learn and adjust. And I think the process, there's a lot of artists out there who create amazing pieces of art. And I think that one of the most important pieces of art is that the act of self-creation. Can I be a better man today than I was yesterday? And so when you kind of take the reins of that, I think is when you really begin to own not just your career, but your life. And when you get clear on the values, I went through an exercise many years ago about values, which was something that I was brought up with, I think, good values in the family, but they were not explicit. I didn't sit down and make decisions around them, as we didn't do that as a family. But in my career, I did that. And I realized that money, which is a big focal point for our society, and it's an enhancer to life, it is not fulfilling in itself. And if you just chase that, I think you're, as Stephen Covey would say, your ladder's up against the wrong wall. And then you get to the top and you realize I climbed the wrong ladder. And so it's those moments of what's important to me as a human being that will create a fulfilling life for me is when you get the reins and begin to sit in the driver's seat. And I also think to be kind to oneself in your decisions, because we do make mistakes. We are human beings, and be kind to yourself, but never miss the opportunity to learn from that, to be a better person tomorrow than you were yesterday.
I love that. What's the lesson that you learned? My curiosity is navigating this space, but we'll pause here. Let me ask, what's a lesson that you learned about being kind to yourself that you can share with the audience, or the need to be kind to yourself?
For whatever reason, I'd have to, review my notes with my therapist, maybe.
So that's key. Therapy is key. I
But-
believe in it.
I had always been super critical of myself, right? I was my own worst whipping boy, as far as if I made a mistake, why did you do that? You're such an idiot, type of internal dialogue. And when I learned to control that and quiet that down and be kind to myself, I was able to relax into my own skin and be more authentic. And I think when you communicate authentically, it's just much more relatable to other human beings. And that's allowed me to connect at a deeper level, which is what I deeply desire as a facilitator in my career, but on a human level, right? Just that deep connection. And I think we all yearn for that at one level or another.
I love that. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, because beating ourselves up is just, and ruminating over the story of how you did it, all those things. So thank you for sharing that example. All right, let's go to Sarah. Sarah, tell us, what are the key ingredients based on your experience, your lived experiences, your career journey? What are the key ingredients or critical ingredients for being successful in your career and maintaining that driver's seat?
Yeah, I'd say I agree a lot with what Rich said. One of the things I hit upon that I was like, oh, he kind of stole my answer. But was the idea of defining your values and then what does success mean through that lens, right? My lens before, I think, was one that I had created, as a child, and wanting to have a certain amount of money or success. And then part of the reason for getting an MBA was simply for the fact that I thought, at least at that time, being a woman, it was one of the best ways being able to achieve that. And then I thought having those credentials would help me to do that, going to a good school and getting the degree. And it does help. But it doesn't mean it's going to get you to where you want to be. And that's what success is going to be. My definition of success has definitely evolved, as I've gotten older. And I agree with Rich about, the bit of being kind to yourself. And I think one of the places for that showed up the most was when becoming a parent. I heard one time say, the things you say to yourself is what you'll say to your child, and it becomes the voice in their head. When you start thinking about what you think about yourself and say to yourself, your child is now going to say in their head. And would you want them to be hearing that voice? It was like an aha kind of like wake up moment for me. And not that I still don't do it or I don't still slip into it, but you start to realize you want to be a little bit kinder to yourself in the hopes that they will be as well.
Wow, that hit me. Like, I received that as a mom. I was like, wow, what did I say to Millie this morning?
I know.
What am I saying to her?
Yeah, no, I know. I'll ask my daughter sometimes, what's one thing you want me to stop doing, one thing you want me to do, and one thing you want me to do more of? And the stop doing is always yelling. And I don't think I yell it all the time, but anytime, it's just bad, right? It's just never good. And because I agree with her and I tell her, you're right, I'll work on that, and let it be seen.
Let's have a separate Zoom call after.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I do that too, right? Right. We all do it. So it's not, but I also, but this goes back to being kind to yourself. If you're going to think in yourself, oh no, what did I say? Think about all the good seeds you planted, in your kid's head too. You can't just take the bad stuff. You got to take the good, right? I'd offer that, thinking about like, when are all the times that you told them, I'm here for you, or you're living your life by example, right? That's a tremendous seed you're planting in them, is who you are as a human, doing this podcast, being a coach, all the success you've had, with clients in your career, and how you're focused around that and that lens is a fantastic lesson for them.
I love it. So I want to do something different, because you both touched on values. So I would like for you to help our listeners get clear on their values. So you work together in doing this work. Give us a way to hone in on the values that matter for us. Like, what's a resource, or how would listeners do this?
I can do a real quick kind of guidance and an exercise if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
So
I'll enjoy it.
you literally just ask people, they can do it just for work if they want, since it's, your career driver. See, let's, maybe stay focused on work, is ask people, what do you value at work? What's important to you when it comes to work? They may say, oh, not to be micromanaged. I want to have learning, etc. And if they can't, if that's too hard, if that's a challenge, ask them the opposite, because it's usually easier. What can you not stand? Why have you left a job? What kind of manager don't you like? And if they do those, and then ask them to create the opposite. And usually, you get someplace between 6 to 10, around 8 is a good number of things. And you think things like I said, responsibility, control of what you're doing, etc. And then if they draw a circle and then divide that circle in like a pizza pie or whatever, to cut it up into like, say, 8 different slices. And if the center is 0 and the outside is 10, around each one of those lines you've created, put something, responsibility, learning, compensation, etc. And then go through that. Those are your work values, right? And now look at each one and say, how is this going? From a 0 to 10, 0 being the worst ever and 10 being utopia. Where do I feel like I'm at on this?
I have to pause you for a second, Sarah. As a fellow coach, the wheel of life is coming up in my head as you're
Yes, very similar, very similar. And I was going to say, you probably know this tool, but I didn't want to assume. So a very similar idea to the wheel of life, right? But doing it just for work. And what I found with clients and people, and we've done this with some of our groups as well, is that when people look at it and they draw out from the 0 to 10 and select it and mark down where they are, a couple of things. One, they look at a totality to see, but it becomes a decision framework about how satisfied they are in their work. How are their values showing up? Where are they being challenged? Like fairness is one that comes up a lot for people. They feel like they weren't treated fairly, or acknowledgement, recognition for their work. That's another one that comes up a lot for people, right? So, and then you can work, people say, okay, now what could you do to move it a little out, Or another great question to that is to flip that. If someone's like, oh, they gave it a 4, rather than saying, why isn't it a 10? Say, why is it a 4? Or what about that gave a 4? Because that means there's some goodness there. And what is it about it that's good? And then how do they have to magnify or improve that versus just saying like, oh, gee, that's not a great number. How do we get that to it? 7 or an 8? So anyway, so that's what I would say is like an exercise to help people identify, their values at work. And then to understand what they are and then how others showing up.
Thank you for that. Thank you for taking us through that activity. What do you think, Rich?
Well, I just wanted to add to or build upon what she'd shared, because Sarah does a lot of people in transition coaching. And so if you're sitting in this seat over here and you're looking at an opportunity, you're interviewing with this company, that's a really valuable thing to take a look at, that wheel kind of exercise, to say, now maybe the money and compensation might be more if you make this jump, but what are those other areas that are really important to your career and your sustainability in that career that may or may not be there? So it can help you hone questions to ask and evaluate the next opportunity in your career as well. Maybe it's better you stay where you are. Maybe it's better to make the leap at more money or at less money, but 5 out of those 7 points are going to be hit at a higher level in this new opportunity, even if the comp may or may not be there. Now, obviously, compensation is a consideration for all people and families, etc. But life is more than that, right?
I think COVID's shown us that, right? If people are more into fulfillment than perhaps the compensation or charting their own journey. Give us an example, Rich, of how our audience can learn to be compassionate with themselves. What's a way they can do that?
Well, that's an important thing to consider, because we think about compassion towards others. We are taught to be thoughtful, put a dollar in this person's can, as if you're walking down the sidewalk. So, hopefully parents are teaching to think, for people to think outside themselves, but often we forget ourselves. And life is kind of like an inhale and an exhale. We spend a lot of time exhaling, right? We're giving our energy, we're giving our compassion, we're giving our empathy to others, but that's unsustainable. You can't just exhale. You need to be able to inhale. So you need to be able to receive kindness from others, empathy from others, and from yourself. And so I think it's an old Chinese metaphor, but life is a breath, right? It's an inhale and an exhale. And so you have to take those moments to pause and do an inhale for yourself, because a lot of times we don't have environments that are there for us. And if no one else is there for us, we need to show up for us, right? So what is it that we need? Take that deep inhale, take a moment to appreciate the blessings that you have, right? And you say, well, I don't have any blessings. Well, this breath that we take for granted, the moment it's not there, it would become very urgent for us to get that breath, but it's available. It's an abundance of it around us, right? And so even something as simple as that, just appreciating the act of a breath, is a way that we can refill ourselves.
Made me think of meditation, making time to meditate.
That all falls under that self-care, which I do believe has become much more relevant now with the disruption of COVID. And you could meditate or you can day drink, and I think meditating is much more sustainable than day drinking.
Did you say day drink? My mind went, okay, all right.
It also makes me think of something else that Rich taught me earlier on about, and that same topic, was to give to others that which you need, right? So if you're feeling lonely, go make a connection. If you're feeling, stuck, go help someone else get unstuck. Drawing and attracting that energy to yourself by giving to others what you need is something, and that expression is something that I got from Rich that I'll say to people often, and how they're feeling something. It's like, how might you give that to somebody else so that then can show up for you?
Yeah, I know for me, I use language like my tank is empty. And so I think about gasoline and how I need to fuel up. And, the language that my therapist might use is give yourself recovery time. So is there recovery for you? So yeah, this is great. Wonder if we can think about additional resources that our audience can leverage to really take ownership of their careers. Do you have any resources that you can share?
Certainly.
So many.
Yeah, and today with podcasts such as this, with the amount of information that's produced regularly and YouTube videos and TED Talks, there's a tremendous amount of things. One of the books that I go back to still, even though it was written probably in the 80s, I believe, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Even more fundamental than that, I think every young person before they leave high school should have read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Just these are basic human things. It's particularly the Dale Carnegie thing. How do you make a human connection? And I think technology is a wonderful enhancement to the human experience, but it's an enhancement. It shouldn't replace the human experience. And so those are 2 very fundamental books that everybody should have on their library. You could probably see that I'm a book fan, and that's only a portion of my shelves around here. So those are 2 old school classics that I would recommend.
I am such a big Stephen Covey fan. The late Stephen Covey, yes, both of those books. And what is his name? Nightingale.
Earl Nightingale,
just that body of work really speaks to me. So thanks for reminding our audience about that. What about you, Sarah?
I'd say 2 books, right? I agree with both of those for sure. Again, I'm a big book person. This is something Rich and I agree on. One right now, my big fave is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. It really, I don't know if you've had a chance. He also has a podcast, but it's all about figuring about what is essential. What do you really need to be doing? Where should you be focusing your energy? How do you actually get more done with less time? Creating some of those boundaries for yourself, deciding what's important in you for your life. And then another one that's just a favorite, I think, especially if you're going through kind of a challenging time, is The Alchemist. It's a classic book. It's more of a fable.
Coelho. I love it.
Yeah, right. But it's just such a good, it's a quick read. It's one of the few books that I've read probably 5 to 10 times.
Yeah.
because it's just a good reminder of kind of trusting yourself and betting on yourself, putting yourself in the driver's seat, you know, letting also the journey go forward with you. It definitely is a favorite of mine. And like I said, it's a little bit softer, not so like businessy, button up, like go do kind of thing. It's just a kind of reminding fable story.
It's such a great story. Yeah, you've touched my heart. I am not sitting in front of my massive book collection today, but I am also, my first job was at the library. So I'm also a book, I'm forgetting the word that you use. I love books. So I'll throw two in there. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. I think that's the late Susan Jeffers. I think that's a great book to give confidence to navigate spaces, especially if you're hesitant to take a risk or to bet on yourself. That book is I recommend it to all my clients. So Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. And then the other book is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It is such a classic. It's an easy read, but it just talks about, we talked about values before, and just Sarah's showing the book for those who are listening and not viewing the video. Yes. Yeah, such a good book. I know he's got a fifth agreement, but the first book, The Four Agreements, really spoke to me. And so we could just talk about resources here.
So I'm going to brag a bit. Way back when that book first came out, I went to a retreat with Don Miguel in Tarrytown, New York. So
Really?
Oh, wow.
With about 35 or 40 people. And that was a life-changing experience based on the Four Agreements. And I just can't help myself. I'll throw one more out there. It's a more current book, but with the topic of being in the driver's seat, career-wise, The Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck is a very important book for people to realize that they are actually much more in the driver's seat than they realize, because the neuroplasticity of the brain, and if you put the effort in to develop it, you could take yourself and your career in any direction.
I don't know. I'm feeling like we should start a book club together.
I was just thinking, like, we should have a book club podcast. Like,
oh yeah, to talk about different books and just the mindset work. Absolutely, those are great resources. Is there, as we begin to wrap up, is there any parting advice that you would give to our audience, really on again about owning their careers?
I think the number one thing I offer is to really trust yourself. Create that space to hear your own voice. Create the space is one of my favorite expressions, because you literally have to usually carve out that time, carve out that space to actually try to listen to yourself and what you're doing. And a great way to do that, if that seems too kind of like pie in the sky, is just to start writing. I'm challenged to do journaling, but like if you're stuck sometime or whatever, you just say to yourself, what am I stuck? What do I need to know now? Whatever, those kind of, anything like that, to just kind of jumpstart yourself to start thinking in the direction to attune to what you want. And this is coming from someone who spent 20 years trying to find it back again, right? I got an MBA, it'll be 25th reunion this May. Can't believe it. But, I did organizational behavior and design, and it took me over 20 years to get back to recognizing that person, who I am and what do I want to be about.
I love that. Okay, another book, Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. I believe that.
Yes, I could pull that one out too. I have it right here. I gotta find it, but I have it right here.
Because you talked about, and she talks about the morning pages, and it just came up for me while you were talking about journaling. I love that. How would you suggest to the audience, our listeners, how do they listen to yourself? Because you can hear the message and not listen.
Oh, great point.
What do you want to tell them?
I think it takes time. I just think that the teacher arrives when the student's ready. And so you may not hear it at first, because you may not be ready to actually do something about it. And that's okay. Like I have a couple of clients I've had this with. I'll tell people to just keep a piece of paper nearby or on their phone to capture moments of joy or delight. No expectations to do anything with it. Don't plan to do anything with it. We'll get there, but just to write it down for two reasons. One, it starts to shift their perspective. They start looking for delight. They start looking for joy in their world. So it helps to raise their energy level. And the second thing I say is that after a while, you're going to start to see a pattern. If you don't try to force it and you just literally capture it, I don't care if it's your child's laugh, if it's a sunset, if it's the rain on the window, whatever is making it, or it could be a work meeting or whatever. But when you lean back and look at that, you'll be able to start to see some of those patterns. And so that's where I think that voice can come through without having to force it. Because I do think it's really hard when you're going through and you're living your life and you're busy and you're working, but you just feel like you're not quite on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy way that people are like, I bought the notepad. That was good for me. I'm like, great. You bought the notepad. Perfect. Love that stuff. Right. That's because at least the intention is there to start thinking about that, to start looking for joy. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the first way you do it, to start inviting that voice in.
Love that. All right, Rich.
Well, I would say, to build on that, that is the value of having a meditation or mindfulness practice.
Mm.
It's a practice. You need to do it regularly. It's like you can't go to the gym once and be in shape, right? To keep those muscles toned, you need to go regularly with some consistency. And taking 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 20 minutes, if you can build up to that, to be mindful, that will quiet the noise down, and you're going to be able to hear those more subtle, deeper whispers from your heart. And then you can then act upon that, acknowledge that, and act upon that. And what I would say is, we are blessed with one life. The older I've gotten, the more I realize how incredibly brief a human life is. Even if you're blessed with a long one, right? It's incredibly brief. And so make it your own. Live your own life. Don't live it for someone else. Don't live for what society says this is how it should be lived. You need, because here's the reality of it. At our funeral, people will be sad, will mourn, and then after the sandwiches and a toast, people will go back to their lives, and your life will be done. And in 3 weeks, your spouse will laugh at a joke, and life goes on. That is the nature of things. So why live it for anyone else but you? Right. So I don't know if that sounds morbid or not, or selfish, but we are given this beautiful gift of a life. Then live it fully for yourself. And I believe in service towards others, but in a way in which is most fulfilling for yourself.
Well said. It's been such a pleasure to have you on season 10 of the podcast. If you were to write a book together, what would the title be?
Leading Human. I couldn't resist. That was right there.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have watched your career too, Simone. Just take off like a rocket ship, and there's nothing more pleasurable than to see people who you know and respect succeed. And so thank you for the opportunity to be a part of your audience here, to share what we have with your audience, and to be kind of part of our journey. We're kind of all on this road. We're all in our driver's seats next to each other here.
Awesome. Yeah, we're on the same road, right? Please tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they'd like to do so.
Sure. So we have leading-human.com as a website, and it's Rich at leading-human.com, or Sarah. Sarah.
With an H, SARAH, at leading-human.com. And
awesome.
Happy to support him when we can, but really grateful for you doing this and giving us the gift of your time and your listeners' times, because it's the best gift we can give to anyone is our time. So thank you.
We really feel, to come from a place of generosity. So if people want to connect with us on LinkedIn, or direct message us, or email us with any kind of questions, or anything we could do to help them be more in the driver's seat of their own career, we're happy to do that, right? Just reach out.
Oh, awesome. You have been amazing. You both have been amazing. And this is new for season 10, and it was wonderful. So thank you so much for being guests on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you. Let's make it a great year.
Appreciate it.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.